When I'm bad, I'm better. That's how Mae West described her exciting life. While other videos talk about a clever and attractive movie star, none are as exciting as this one. Back in the old days, around the 1930s, Mae West was a big deal because of her naughty talk and her sassy walk. But before she became a famous movie star, she got into trouble for putting on not one, but two daring plays. This video is all about how she built her unique image while working in Broadway and getting lots of attention from the news. She even had a little time in jail. Now, more than 100 years later, her story teaches us how to handle scandals and maybe even come out stronger. If you want to explore more vintage mysteries, click on the link below. Take our Golden Age quiz to test your knowledge about the past. Mae West was a real trailblazer. She said things like, "Sex is emotion in motion," which got everyone talking. She wasn't just beautiful, she was confident, witty, and worked really hard. Did you know she even wrote her own scripts with funny lines? In a world where a single woman smashed through the male-dominated showbiz scene of the early 20th century, not just succeeding but conquering it. But her path to glory wasn't all sunshine, it had its shadows. Brace yourself for an inspiring journey through audacity, resilience, and unapologetic self-expression. You will completely change your mind about Mae West after watching this video. But what's even cooler is how she didn't follow the rules for women back then. Mae West was totally open about her feelings and had lots of romantic relationships. She didn't like it when men tried to boss her around, and she even had boyfriends who were African American, which was unusual at that time. The best part? She didn't let anyone tell her how to live. Mae West made her own rules. She once said, "Marriage is a great institution, but I'm not ready for an institution." That's pretty bold, right? How did Mae West make Hollywood better, you ask? Well, this sassy lady not only rescued Paramount Studios from bankruptcy in the 1930s, but she also pushed for women to be treated equally with men. To really understand this complex personality, you need to begin at the beginning. Mae West didn't just become a huge star overnight. Her journey started in a rather unexpected way. Long before she graced the stage, she was just a regular young girl. Well, not exactly. In fact, it seems like Mae West had a hunger for fame from the very beginning. She took her first steps into the world of acting at just 5 years old, and her diva-like behaviour showed up not long after. You could say she was born for the spotlight. She had this life figured out so early on. "When I was only 5 years old, still picking my nose, how about you?" In her own words, West once said that she wouldn't leave the house unless she was all dolled up. She was obsessed with her own appearance. But this wasn't just about being conceited. She was ready to prove herself through hard work. Mae West was a force to be reckoned with right from the start. Mae West had one burning desire: fame. And let me tell you, by the time she hit 3rd grade, school was the last thing on her mind. No, instead of textbooks, she opted for a different kind of education. She spent a few short weeks at a dance academy and then stepped onto the stage as Baby May in amateur shows. Her journey from there took her straight to the Gotham Theatre. Baby May was a sensation, and that little girl was hooked on the entertainment world forever. In her own words, "While others might long for life, freedom, and chasing happiness, I craved the spotlight." What's astonishing is that May was already a paid performer, and she wasn't even a teenager yet. She always knew she was destined for more than life as a staid Victorian housewife. In her autobiography she wrote, "I was a child of the new century, just around the corner." She was growing up fast, and her story was just beginning. You might be wondering if Mae West had a head start in life, and you're absolutely right. Mae West always saw herself as a confident and strong woman, and just like her career in acting, she began early. Actually, really early. There's a story that says West wanted to start dating before she grew up, so she wouldn't have to worry about having babies too soon. She admitted, "I seduced my 21-year-old music teacher when I was young, and told him it was no big deal because I'd already done it before." West's relaxed way of looking at love and relationships became a big part of who she was, and when people tried to stop her, things usually got pretty crazy. You can tell she didn't worry about her reputation. When West's mum noticed she was spending too much time with one man, she'd tell her to date others as well. When she had a crush on band leader Joseph Schenk, her mum suggested she keep her options open, so West ended up dating every member of the band, one by one. She never stuck with a boyfriend for more than a week or two, because her stage career was her top priority. Very different advice from what I would give my daughter. Even the most passionate teenage romance couldn't steer her away from her dreams, at least not at first. When Mae West was 17, she was a big star in vaudeville, but she was hard to impress. Then she noticed a guy named Frank Wallace was getting more applause than her. He asked her to perform together, and she said yes, but it wasn't a love story right away. Even though people thought she was into romance, West didn't mix love with work. While they practiced their act, Frank sometimes tried to get romantic with her after, like he was used to. Usually she said no, but one night she surprised him by jumping into his arms. After that they were a couple both on and off the stage. Their relationship lasted longer than her usual ones, but maybe it should have ended sooner. During a 10-week tour, Mae West and Frank Wallace fell in love. Well, at least Frank did. Their relationship was kind of like their rehearsals. He asked her to marry him, she said no, and she sometimes flirted with other people, but Frank didn't give up. Finally, Mae West agreed to marry him, and they ran away to Milwaukee. But here's where the story takes a turn. Marriage seemed to change things. On their first night as a married couple, she got her own hotel room, but there's another side to this story. According to Frank, things got worse, and he realized she wasn't ready to settle down like she promised. She'd leave their room at midnight, lock him in, and come back after 3 a.m. People said she was going on dates with local men, maybe 5 of them in Minneapolis. When Frank talked to her about it, it didn't go well. Right from the beginning you can tell Mae West was quite unusual. In her world, husbands didn't stay home and wives weren't stuck indoors. She wanted her freedom. But Frank was so in love with her that he didn't want to upset things and lose her. He knew that Mae West never even told her family about the marriage, and she didn't want to. Maybe in her mind the whole marriage didn't exist. They once mixed business with pleasure, but when it came to Wallace, West quickly backed away from the pleasure part of the deal, then moved away from the business aspect as well. Even though she had shown him the door, Mae West's estranged husband, Frank Wallace, found his way back into her life. She pleaded with him for an annulment, but neither of them bothered with the legal process to end the marriage. As we'll soon discover, this decision would come back to haunt them. Going solo, she honed her look and act, drawing a lot of inspiration from the best female impersonators of that time. Some started whispering that Mae West might actually be a man beneath all those costumes and makeup. Little did they know this wouldn't be the last time West would stir up these sorts of scandalous rumours, as you'll find out soon. Mae West became famous in vaudeville by being bold and daring, but even as she got more popular, she had a tough time getting accepted. Other performers thought her act was too naughty, and some even said she should do burlesque, which was a big insult in her world. Surprisingly, Mae West didn't have typical bad habits like smoking or drinking. She only really liked men and looking good. Even though she was bold, West saw that other daring acts in vaudeville had a hard time, but she believed that if she stuck to her style, it would work out in the end. Mae West started making enough money to create her own act. She bought costumes and picked songs to perform. In vaudeville, people usually worked together, but Mae West was ahead of her time. This meant she had trouble finding writers and musicians to work with, but that didn't stop her. Even though she dropped out of school early, she got busy writing her own act. She teamed up with a man named Harry Richmond to play the piano and say some lines. She made him famous, but it wasn't always easy to work with her. Why? Because if he started dating West, she'd fire him, so even though they liked each other, he tried to keep things professional. Their show was a hit at first, but West got upset with him and showed it on stage. Eventually Richmond gave in, and she fired him the next day. No matter who performed with her, one thing was clear. Mae West always stole the show. Mae West's whole persona was scandalous. It's not easy to pick just one scandal from her life, and the same goes for the men in her life. But there was one man who stood out, Mr. D. What made him so special? She had a secret lover. She once had an Italian lover named Mr. D. He was likely Guido Diero, a vaudeville performer. Their relationship was tumultuous. Diero grew increasingly jealous and wanted to marry her, but she was already married to Frank Wallace. Diero had a dark secret too. He was also married. She didn't use his real name in her writing to hide their affair. She was in mortal danger. Despite precautions, West became pregnant with Diero's child. Realizing she wasn't ready for marriage or motherhood, she did what she had to, but the procedure went wrong, leaving her unable to have kids and almost taking her life. Heartbroken, Diero ended their relationship, but don't stress too much for our dear May. She quickly moved on. West met James Timoney, who wasn't in showbiz. He became her biggest supporter and helped her get a secret divorce from Wallace. His support was essential for what was to come. While driving by the waterfront one day, Mae West couldn't help but notice two sailors seeking the company of a woman. This striking sight ignited an idea that would reshape her life. Using her pen name, Jane Mast, West began crafting a play centered around the adventures of a prostitute named Margie, known for her kind heart. She joined forces with a director who seemed equally drawn to her charm as her writing. In fact, his constant admiration for her more alluring qualities led her to choose a straightforward title for the play. She simply called it Sex. Mae West had been on Broadway before, but this was her first time as the star of the show. People were talking about it, and sailors lined up to see it. Even though some people didn't like it when the play came to Broadway, everyone went to see it. It became the most talked about show of the year, but of course the backlash began. Behind the scenes, another writer sued Mae West and her group for lots of money, but Mae West didn't back down. She was the writer and the star of this provocative play, and it made her super famous. Kind of famous for the wrong reasons too. She said, "I became a writer because I needed stuff to work with and had no place to get it." She explained that she gave a guy a few bucks to write a play based on her idea, but it turned out so bad and dirty that she fired him. Then newspapers started writing really angry articles about how bad the play was for people's morals. But you know what? None of that really bothered West. Every night people came to watch, hoping for daring stories and spicy jokes, and that's exactly what they got. In just 5 years, West went from being new to Broadway to being one of its most famous and maybe infamous stars. But then everything turned upside down in the blink of an eye. But the worst part was still coming. Mae West waited and thought someone would stop her play, like by making it illegal. But week after week nothing happened, so she decided to do something even more shocking. She wrote a new play she thought would be even more controversial. She called it The Drag, inspired by homosexual men and drag queens she'd met in showbiz. Even though it never went to Broadway, it was a big success. What's surprising is that Mae West didn't act in it. She let the characters in the play be the stars. That's not what you'd expect from her. Everyone just couldn't stop talking about her. She had heard some pretty strange things about herself over the years, some of them more bizarre than others. Some said she was actually frigid, which means she didn't enjoy romantic things. Others said she had both boy and girl private parts or had surgery to change her gender. Some believed she never did anything romantic, while others thought she was really a man pretending to be a woman. Can you believe it? Mae West had her fair share of scandals, but none like her famous play Sex. It was a big hit for months, but in 1927 trouble came knocking. One night police arrested Mae West and her fellow performers during the play. Surprisingly, she saw this as a chance. She spent a night in jail and got her boyfriend, James Timoney, to help protect the show. The next night she showed the restraining order to the officers. They charged her with making an immoral play. West faced it all in her own style, dressed fancy, and saying her play was one of the cleanest on Broadway. The jury found them guilty, and West waited for her punishment. She got 10 days in jail and a $500 fine. But she thought the attention was worth more. She even told stories about her time in jail, like wearing silk underwear and going on rides with the warden. On April 19, 1927, she went to Roosevelt Island jail wearing her silk underwear. "I want to wear my silk underwear," West demanded. The warden agreed, and she tried to make her fellow inmates happier. "When I went into a large dormitory, all the women began applauding. 'Glad to see you. Hello, May.' I didn't care for the use of my first name, but I figured if I could make them a less miserable mob, I was doing some good." Released 8 days early for good behaviour, West's stories like this one made her a legend against censorship, a status she still has today. She made her money from her scandalous past. Studios wanted her to come to Hollywood, but others say her old friend George Raft, now a famous actor, helped her get there. She played a character called Diamond Lil on Broadway, and it was a big hit. Then, in Hollywood, she played a character called Lady Lou in a movie called She Done Him Wrong. This made her super famous. Paramount signed Mae West to a lucrative 2-year contract. In her first movie, she acted in her own special way and was the star. Her transition from Broadway to Hollywood was swift and seamless. Fortunately for West, the studio needed her as much as she needed them due to the Great Depression's impact on the industry. Her debut picture became a life-saving hit for Paramount. Mae West even convinced them to hire an actor named Cary Grant, who wasn't famous yet. She also wanted a black actor in the movie, and that was unusual at the time. It was a risky move, but it paid off. She became America's 5th most popular star and the highest paid woman in the country. In a 1933 review, Variety declared, "She's as hot an issue as Hitler." When the Great Depression got worse, Mae West was still doing well, but Broadway and vaudeville shows were not doing so great because fewer people were watching, so she needed a new stage to perform on. Hollywood was doing fine even in the tough times, but Mae West was almost 40 years old, and some people thought her act was too wild for the movies. The corseted Lady Lou, dripping with extravagance and diamonds, tough talk, irony and sexual innuendo, at a time when the United States drew its cultural inspiration from New York, West epitomized the quintessential New Yorker. She became the perfect Depression diva. She could make you forget your troubles without asking you to deny your roots, your sexuality, or the allure of the lush life. Mae West had faced problems with censorship on Broadway, but things got even harder when she ventured into Hollywood. People who didn't like certain things in movies had been complaining for a while. Now they were causing real trouble. They even made a list, calling Mae West and others box office poison, which was really bad for her career. She had been good at using controversy before, but this time it was a big challenge. And the challenges kept coming. In 1937, Mae West appeared on the radio to talk about her movie Every Day's a Holiday. But oops, she said some things that made some people uncomfortable. They complained a lot to the people in charge of the radio. The radio station got scared and blamed everything on Mae West, and they even told her she couldn't come back. But guess what? Mae West wasn't the type to give up. Instead of dealing with the strict rules in Hollywood, she decided to try something new in Las Vegas. When she wasn't making movies, she went back to singing on stage and in nightclubs. It worked. People finally realized how awesome she was after being in showbiz for more than 20 years, the legend she had become. Yet being shut out of films by studios had been frustrating, and she carried that frustration with her. She came up with an unusual idea. West brought a group of bodybuilders to join her on stage during her Vegas performances. She loved looking at their strong bodies, and she thought other ladies would too. And here's the big surprise. She even fell in love with one of them. Mae West said, "Censorship made me," and that became her truth. This is the story of how Mae West, a girl from Brooklyn with humble beginnings, became one of the most iconic women of the 20th century, a pin-up even today. It's also a snapshot of an era, particularly the moral landscape of the early 1900s, helping us understand West's place in it and how she mastered it. Between World War I, Prohibition, the Roaring Twenties and the Great Depression, there was political turmoil and cultural experimentation mixed with strict repression. A sexual revolution coincided with the war, and contraception was discussed openly for the first time. Audiences craved sensuality in theatre and movies, but censors wanted to suppress it. From the start, West grasped this conflict and skillfully straddled the line between what was allowed and what wasn't. She wouldn't let censors stop her, saying, "My fight has been against depression, repression, and suppression." West was at the forefront of what was hot. Mae West saw all this and knew how to mix what people wanted with what was allowed. She wasn't going to let rules get in her way. She was always 1 or 2 steps ahead of her time, introducing daring dances like the shimmy to audiences not entirely ready for them. Cary Grant once remarked that Mae West sacrificed everything for her career, as her life was inseparable from her profession. She even reshaped her own history to fit her self-image, making up stories about her family and denying past marriages. And yes, she had quite an ego. She had the ego of a true superstar, refusing to work with the same director twice after her film Belle of the 90s. Despite her fame, we know very little about her inner thoughts and feelings, which is just how she wanted it. After a Broadway performance, she once told the highly accomplished Catherine Cornell, "Thanks, honey. Hope I can say the same for you sometime." Clearly, West's massive ego was a driving force in her life. She had a habit of insulting other Hollywood stars like Clara Bow, Rita Hayworth, and Elizabeth Taylor, that they weren't all that special. There was yet one exception to her rule. She had some respect for Marilyn Monroe, acknowledging that Monroe had something, though she couldn't resist adding, "Of course, she copied me." Unveiling the layers of make-up to understand the complex Mae West is an ambitious task. West had a knack for hiding her true self, but this story offers glimpses of her inner life. In the world of a determined and relentless woman, we get a true Westian tale. As she herself said, "I like movies about strong women. I was the first liberated woman, you know. No guy was going to get the best of me." She did leave us with a valuable lesson. Remember Mae West and how she boldly embraced her unique self. You can do the same. Don't be afraid to be you. Stand up for what you believe in and make your own path in life. But don't think you can just leave now. You're not done yet. Oh no. Here's the next video you've got to check out. Why were Carole Lombard's scandals kept under wraps? I'm curious to hear what you think about it.